So this little slideshow is about assessment strategies for online courses, and there are just a few tips in here that you may want to consider as you are setting up assessments, and really it could be online or face-to-face, although some of the material here is especially relevant for online courses. So just a little reminder of what backward design is. That's a template for structuring your course design process. And the first step in backward design is determining your learning goals and objectives. There's some more information on that piece of the backward design model in an earlier PowerPoint called Designing Your Online Course. The second step in designing a backward design is to plan the assessments. Notice that you want to look for assessments that are ongoing, a variety of styles, both high and low stakes assessments, large assessments and smaller ones. Assessments that are aligned clearly with your learning goals and objectives, and that alignment is made explicit to students. And of varying types. And you can see some types there. I might also, especially for arts classes, add creation of a product to that list of assessments, faculty observation of a student completing a task or completing a performance, also our assessment activities. There are two different types of assessments. Formative and summative assessments. Formative assessments are assessments that you really should be doing in class daily. They're sort of the daily check on how students are performing against the learning objectives of your class. And that's feedback directly to the student about how the student can improve his or her work in your class. The formative assessment occurs during instruction, occurs very routinely, and it allows you as the instructor to make decisions about how to format the learning moving forward, and it allows the student to make some judgments about their own progress in the course. Summative assessments are what we typically think of when we think of assessments. They're the assessments on which grades are based, and you're making judgments about a student's performance in a summative assessment. Summative assessments are typically announced, and they occur at a particular point in time to determine what students know and how students can improve their work in your class. There are conceptual frameworks about the ways to consider assignments, assessments, and how to line those up. The one with which we're all probably most familiar is Bloom's taxonomy. This is a way of thinking about assessments and the difficulty level of assessments. Higher level Bloom's taxonomy assessments require higher order thinking from students and more student engagement. So at the bottom here is remember, which is just recognizing and recalling facts. That does not require a lot of student construction of knowledge, all the way up to creating, which is making a product, something that is new, and that requires much more student engagement with their own learning. You want your assessments to actually be at a variety of levels. I think it is in almost all disciplines, students have to understand some factual information or recall some factual information before they are ready to evaluate or create new products. And so typically assessments might be across the spectrum here, and certainly in the course of a student completing a degree program, we would expect assessments to be across this spectrum. So frequently you read that you want assessments to focus on higher order learning skills, which I think is likely true on the whole, but there's nothing wrong with an assessment that requires a student to remember or understand certain factual information that's necessary for them to move forward into the higher orders of evaluating and creating. Another framework, more recent, that you may find interesting is called Fink's Taxonomy of Significant Learning Experiences. And this may be helpful to you as you're thinking about both student learning outcome statements and the assessments for those. So this taxonomy takes into account different kinds of thinking and different kinds of student learning outcomes that you may have beyond just Bloom's taxonomy. So this taxonomy looks at some ideas about human dimension, learning about yourself or learning about others, about learning to learn, becoming a better student, about caring, so some empathy development here. So this is another way to think about, another lens to think about setting up student learning outcome statements and then the assessments to go along with them. It is certainly reasonable to think that we might have student learning outcomes for students that involve they're becoming a better student in some way, that students learn how to prepare for major exams, or that students learn how to take effective notes for themselves, or that sort of learning outcome. And those are reasonable goals and student learning outcomes to have in a course, and this taxonomy helps you think through how to align those. There's something a little bit different if that's useful. Best practices for online assessment. Some tips for assessment in online courses. Formative assessment should occur in every synchronous class and frequently in asynchronous work as well. So if you're commenting on discussion board posts, or if you're commenting on a student submission, a reflection essay, where you are not necessarily assigning a grade, but you are giving student feedback, it's formative assessment. Smaller frequent assessments spur student engagement and discourage cheating. Assignments that focus on higher order skills, higher order thinking skills, discourage cheating. So it's hard to cheat if the assignment is to create a TED Talk based on your understanding of this concept. That's harder to cheat on than a quiz or a test. Consider using pre-quizzes to set the stage for what you want students to learn. So you might set up a set of questions that ask students to tell you what they know about something or what their understanding is about something prior to the unit of study, what their previous experience is with something, and that helps them categorize what they are getting ready to learn. It helps them get ready to learn what they're getting ready to learn. As much as possible, give learners a choice in how to demonstrate learning. This is very helpful to make your course accessible to students from all backgrounds and all learning preferences. If you can give them a choice in how to demonstrate the knowledge rather than locking them into a particular format, that makes your course more accessible. And then lastly, just a very practical tip, set due dates so that you have time to give students feedback on their work. You can choose when you want the due date to be, and so choose it for a time in your own schedule that you have time to give substantive feedback to students, particularly in online courses where they are not seeing you on a routine basis. Here are some additional resources that may be helpful to you in thinking through both your assessments and some instructional strategies. And so perhaps that is useful to you moving forward. Thank you for your time today.